Welcome to Lecture 4 of Hebrew 1 and 2. So far we have discussed vowels and consonants, how to divide syllables, the difference between open and closed syllables and the vowels each prefer, the two different kinds of dagesh, forte, which doubles the letter, line, which hardens bagad kafat letters. We've talked about schwa, both vocal schwa, which we pronounce, and the silent or unvocal schwa, which typically just closes a syllable and is not pronounced. We've also begun learning prepositions, specifically those prepositions that are prefixed to the front of a word, like lamed, beit, kaf, all three of which act very similar to the conjunction vav. We also took a quick look at the preposition min, meaning from, which may be an independent standalone preposition or may drop the nun, prefix itself to the word in question, and insert a dagesh forte into the first letter of the word so that the preposition can keep its short vowel hirik. So in 3 lessons, we've covered quite a bit. Today, we're going to look at 2 more parts of speech, nouns and adjectives. By the grace of God, nouns and adjectives in Hebrew are almost identical, which makes our job of learning them far easier. So let's get started. Nouns in most languages are distinguished as either being singular or plural. In English, we have dog. We also have dogs. Dog is singular. Dogs, with an S, is plural. Occasionally, like with the word fox and foxes, we have to add ES in English instead of S. Like any language, of course, there are exceptions. Mouse becomes mice. Millennium, borrowed from Latin and Greek, is the plural of millennia. And deer, just to be stubborn, doesn't change at all. As native English speakers, we're used to identifying if we're talking about one object or more than one, and Hebrew does the same. However, Hebrew also notes the difference between feminine and masculine when it comes to nouns. English, thankfully, does not worry about gender in its nouns because who really cares if the word tree is feminine or masculine? Well, Hebrew does, apparently, and actually so does English. Boats, for instance, are usually considered feminine, as are the concept of liberty and justice. That's why the statutes of both liberty and justice are women. This will all make a little more sense in Hebrew as we go on, but we need to at least realize that nouns and adjectives in Hebrew are either singular or plural, masculine or feminine. Despite splitting the 2 categories of gender, there are still only 6 possible nouns in Hebrew: masculine singular, masculine dual, masculine plural, feminine singular, feminine dual, feminine plural. You'll notice that masculine singular has no official ending. Instead, the masculine singular, sometimes called MS for short, is simply the word itself. The feminine, on the other hand, has an ending in the singular, a kametz he, as in the word Torah. Although the kametz he is not really an ending, it's part of the word. The word is not Tor, the word is Torah. The feminine ending is part of the word and the gender identification of the word. There is no masculine word for law. It's only feminine, Torah, feminine singular, or FS for short. We need to know what the singular form is of a word because when we're looking words up in a Hebrew lexicon, we will look those words up in their singular form. In addition, on quizzes, in class, and later in papers in other bright classes, we will also identify the word in its singular form. So for Torot, we would say it is feminine plural, FP, from Torah, law. There are also the 2 dual endings, meaning two, although you'll notice that they are almost always the same. The feminine ending simply inserts a tav so that you can recognize the word as a feminine. Tav is very common in feminine words, especially in words that end in the kametz he. Oftentimes, when there is another word following or another letter following the word in question, the word will drop the kametz he and add a tav. So his law is not Torah ho with a he, but Torah to with a tav. One last note. Although the kametz he is the most common feminine ending, occasionally feminine singular nouns will also end in tav, even if there is no added suffix or no word coming afterwards. You simply need to get used to seeing kametz he as the typical feminine ending, but be aware of the fact that feminine nouns may also end in tav. Here is a complete table of nouns in Hebrew with all 6 endings: masculine, feminine, singular, plural, and dual. Feel free to reference this helpful chart. Although not foolproof, but most generally, when you see a mem, it's masculine. When you see a tav or a hey, it's feminine. I've highlighted several different words in this chart to simply point out a few changes that take place when we add letters onto a word. For instance, a suffix to mark number and gender. This is really for information's sake only, so that you're aware when you see a word in the text that looks like the words you know, but looks a little different. You'll remember that words change, most often with changes in the vowels, but occasionally with the consonants. For example, in the first column, melech has become malakim. This pattern of noun with 2 segals, like the word melech here, meaning king, is called a segalet because it has 2 segals. Segalets have an accent on the first syllable rather than on the second syllable, hence the little caret symbol above the mem in the segal. This accent is what allows the open syllable to retain its short vowel. However, the vowels will change when you move the accent from the first syllable, meh, to the end of the word, malakim. The first segol is now in an open, unaccented syllable, so it reduces to a vocal schwa. The second segol is now also in an unaccented syllable, so it lengthens and becomes a kametz. This is a very common vowel change pattern, and you will see this pattern in the text a lot. Not really important to memorize anything here other than the yod mem suffix to mark the masculine plural, but again, it's good to at least be aware of some of these changes. In the next example, dabar, the next word down the list, also has its first syllable reduced to a schwa because the kametz in that syllable does not like to be too far away from the tone syllable. We call this reduction in a syllable that is 2 syllables away from the accent propretonic vowel reduction. Since here, after adding the yod mem, the kametz is now in the propretonic position, 2 syllables away from the accent syllable, which it greatly dislikes. So the kametz becomes a schwa. I've also highlighted the bottom word, yom, meaning day, because when a suffix is added, yom becomes ya, as in yamim. The O-class vowel is replaced by an A-class vowel. I've also highlighted in the next column the word for daughter, bat, which becomes banot. This is a double change, because first, bat replaces the tav with a nun, so that it closely resembles the word for son, ben, with a feminine plural ending, ot. The patak under the bait in bat also now becomes a kametz. It's a quite irregular vowel change pattern, but several words will shift like this to different consonants or vowel families, like yom and yam when they are made plural. It's rare, but it happens. But it usually happens with common words that you know and will quickly recognize and realize what is going on. For instance, the word house, bayit, which is not on this chart, becomes beitim. You'll simply get used to it. The word occurs so often you'll recognize it when you see it. In the third column, the third word down is raglaim. It is a dual because at last count most of us have 2 legs. The vowels are slightly different than we expect. Rather than a schwa under the resh and the kametz under the gimel, like melech in the first column, it's a patak under the resh and a silent schwa under the gimel. The difference is because the accent doesn't shift all the way to the end of the word, raglaim, but to the second to last syllable, raglayim. But rather than trying to memorize another accent pattern, simply note again that the word has the same dual ending as all the others, ayim. Hands, yadayim, the word right under feet or legs, and eyes, anayim. The words under hands are all exactly the same. So don't worry about other changes, just learn to notice the ending pattern. Masculine singular has no ending. Masculine plural, regardless of what the rest of the word does, ends in yod mem. Feminine plural in holam vav tav. Feminine singular usually in hey. Dual is ayim. Unless the word is feminine, then it is atayim. Very simple endings. You'll get used to them to the point that you won't even think about it anymore because they are everywhere. Just focus on the endings. As in English, however, there are also exceptions to these patterns in Hebrew. There are 5, actually. First, there are some words that are simply feminine, even though they don't actually have a feminine ending of hey or tav, like the word earth, which is eretz. It's simply feminine. It's really not a huge deal that you know that it's feminine, unless you're scratching your head trying to figure out why eretz is paired with a feminine verb. I personally don't find it valuable to memorize the gender of all the nouns the way we do in Spanish or German. You simply have to look around at the rest of the verse and the gender should be obvious, or in many cases you realize the gender is completely irrelevant. A second exception is that some words are masculine but take feminine endings. The word father is the most obvious. Father is always masculine, but the plural takes the plural feminine ending, avot, not the masculine plural ending avim. Some words are just obnoxious like that. A third exception is that some words will not even write out the whole word. They will often drop the vav out of the holum vav. We call this defective spelling rather than full or plene spelling. Just be aware if you ever wonder why a letter is missing. A fourth exception is that some words will always have a dual ending. The three most common being Egypt, which technically actually did used to be two kingdoms, north and south, and then waters and heavens. Why waters and heavens are dual, I couldn't tell you, but they are always written that way. We translate them, however, based on context as singular or as plurals. Heavens, waters, the sea, Egypt, etc. And then finally, a fifth exception. As in English, some words seem to have absolutely no connection between their singular form and the plural. Man, ish, becomes anoshim. Women, isha, becomes nashim. Why? Why not? But again, you simply just get used to seeing it in the text. Simply just be aware that there are exceptions to these rules. So just to recap, masculine singular ends in nothing. Masculine plural ends in yod mem. Feminine singular usually ends in he, sometimes in tav. Feminine plural is holum vav tav. Dual is ayim or atayim. The movement of the accent onto the last syllable when adding on the suffix messes with words and the vowels, and it affects them in any number of ways. You'll see at the bottom of this page also are geminates, which is a change I didn't talk about. That's a fancy term for a number with 3 letters, but only 2 are written, because it's easier and quicker to write 2 letters than 3 because the second and the third letter are the same. In the normal masculine singular, we see simply 2 letters. When, however, we add to the word with a suffix, we need to show that the third letter is sort of there. So we put a dagesh forte in the second letter, which doubles it accounting for the third letter. Really, nothing else changes, just a dagesh. Of course, with all of these rules and all of these changes, there are exceptions to all of it. There are words that don't show a particular gender but still have it, words that show the opposite gender than the one they have, words that are not dual but always look dual, words that are completely irregular, and words that have irregular spelling. What fun. But actually, if we sit down and think about it, all the endings remain the same regardless of the rest of the changes. So simply memorize the endings. There are only 6, 2 dual look the same, and there's not technically a masculine singular. So really it's closer to 3 or 4. The good news in all of this, though, is that you have not just learned all the endings for nouns, you've actually also learned all the endings for adjectives, because adjectives have the exact same endings. Actually, they have feminine and masculine. There is no dual ending for an adjective. For dual nouns, adjective will just use plural endings. So here's the adjective ending chart, which is really just the noun ending chart without the dual. To use an adjective in Hebrew, we simply place it next to the word it is modifying. However, in Hebrew, there are 2 types of relationships between an adjective and the word it modifies. We have more than 2 patterns in English, so be glad we just have 2 in Hebrew. The first pattern is the attributed pattern. The adjective attributes some quality or characteristic to the noun. For instance, a good man. The adjective good is attributing some quality to the noun man. Although in Hebrew, the adjective in an attributed case will follow the word it is modifying. So we would say man good rather than good man. In Hebrew, we would read this as ish tov. If we have a woman, we would have to say Isha Tova. You'll notice that the two words have to agree with each other in number, whether they are plural or singular, and they have to agree with each other in gender, whether feminine or masculine. In the first example, Ish Tov, Ish is masculine, so Tov is masculine. In the second example, Isha Tova, a good woman, Isha is feminine, so Tova must be feminine. The same is true for a plural, Anashim Tovim, and women, Nashim Tovot. Again, they have to agree with each other in gender and they have to agree with each other in number. Although there's also an agreement in terms of definiteness. If the noun has the definite article, then the adjective will also have the definite article. So instead of ish tov, we have ha-ish, ha-tov, the man, the good. The words must agree. This is really what shows us that this is the attributed case, that they agree with each other in definiteness, in gender, and in number. There is, however, another option of usage rather than the attributive pattern, and that is the predicate pattern. You'll probably remember from grade school that predicate usually means everything not including the subject, generally the verb and everything after the verb. To get to the adjective in the predicate, we basically need a verb or need to supply a verb, usually a helping verb, except that Hebrew doesn't use helping verbs. Instead, the relationship between the noun and the adjective is simply understood, and the helping verb is simply implied, which means that instead of good man, we have the man in the subject part of the sentence, and good as an adjective in the predicate part of the sentence. We want to pair good with man, so to do this, we simply put the adjective right next to the noun and translate the pair as the man is good. Now you might say, how do we know that this isn't just the good man? Well, there are two clues. First, the adjective in the predicate use often comes before the noun. Not always, but most often, while an attributive adjective will come after the noun. And second, and this is the most clear and obvious way to know the difference, a predicate adjective will not be definite. It will not have a definite article, even if the noun is definite, which is a major flag that the adjective has a predicate relationship. So if we have the man, ha-ish, instead of having the good in an attributive relationship, ha-tov, we will instead have tov, ha-ish, good, the man, which we would translate as good is the man or the man is good. One last use of the adjective is the substantival use or the substantive use. Sometimes we use the adjective in Hebrew and even in biblical Koine Greek as a stand-in for the noun. So instead of holy men, anoshim, kadoshim, we simply write the Hebrew word holy in the masculine plural by itself, kadoshim. And there you have it, holy men. When you look at it, it simply looks like holy. Sometimes there may even be a definite article on the front, hakodoshim, which is helpful, the holy, and since it's masculine plural, we know that it means the holy men, or the holy ones. This is the substantival use because the adjective is serving as both the adjective and the noun together in a single word. One last quick note. Adjectives change and shift vowels the same way that nouns do. However, one extra change takes place in a few adjectives because many adjectives end in segol he. The word hard, for instance, is the word kasheh. These words will simply drop the segol he and add on the normal suffix. So hard earth, and remember that earth is feminine, becomes eretz kashah rather than eretz kasheh. Well, we have reached the end of nouns and adjectives. Hopefully that wasn't so bad. Quizlet is set up to help you solidify this information as well as flashcards on Quizlet for vocab. Watch the video as many times as you need, and don't forget to take your emailed vocabulary quiz before the next class. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Again, the main point of this lecture is simply to memorize the 6 possible endings for nouns and adjectives. Masculine singular has no ending. Masculine plural is yod, mem, im. Feminine singular typically ends in kamet he, occasionally in tav. Feminine plural ends in holem, vav, tav. And the duals end in ayim or atayim, with the tav inserted into the feminine dual. Again, 6 simple endings that you can master in no time at all.